Longevity Junkie. It's time to get your fix. I'm Nikki Lee.
I'm Buck Joffrey.
And today we talk with Dr. Robert Enright, a licensed psychologist, professor, and pioneer in forgiveness science, about his groundbreaking work helping people heal through the power of forgiveness, backed by decades of research and real-world applications. We also are going to get some life-saving news from Japan. But first, Buck, how are you?
Oh, good. Good. How are you?
I'm good. I don't know what this Japan saving news is, but have you ever been to Japan?
Yes, I have.
Yay!
Yeah, it was actually one of my favorite trips. I went with my daughters. I think it was like 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year. I don't know. We went to South Korea and Japan, and so South Korea, by the way, was kind of just like going to Chicago. I don't know. Because it's so westernized and stuff like that. But anyway, I went to the coolest part of South Korea for me was the DMZ, like between North Korea and South Korea. There's that demilitarized zone, so like looking into North Korea and all like the fake cities and stuff. So that was kind of cool. Anyway,
Wow,
Japan, on the other hand, is very cool, and I mean, it's just, you know, the cultural stuff is insane. My favorite thing about Japan, by far and away, is sumo culture.
The sumo wrestling culture.
Sumo culture is so cool. If you go to my personal Instagram,
Crazy.
You'll see there's a couple slides where I took my daughters to this place where they did two ex sumo champions did a demonstration for us. Over lunch, and they were like fight, and then they dressed my daughters up as sumo wrestlers, like in big sumo costumes, and then they were like pretend fighting with them. It was really cute. But that's like that culture is just so interesting to me, like so fascinating. I want to go back for sumo season at some point.
Wait, but what specifically about it makes you so interested?
Well, it's got like its own. It's almost a religion. Yeah, so it's like
I didn't know that.
Whereas like, I mean, I don't know if it's technically a religion, but it's like its own culture where they follow very specific rules and they have their own superstitions and things like that. Like, I'll give you an example what sumo wrestlers eat for lunch. It was actually pretty good. Very rich, as you can imagine, because you have to be very heavy.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, I'm wondering what that was. Mashed potatoes and
they eat a lot. No, they eat a lot of chicken. All right. So what's interesting is they don't eat animals that are on all fours. So no beef, no pork, no nothing like that, because it's superstitious about being on all fours, because that means you lose the sumo fight. So chicken's only on 2 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Do they eat like vegetables and things like that?
Yeah. They eat vegetables too, but tons and tons of chicken because, you know, you need the protein. And chickens don't walk on all fours.
But they're not. It's not like they're really muscular. I don't know. They look like they're just basically fat.
Oh, I think they've got a lot of muscle under that fat.
I'm sure there's muscle under the fat, but like, I don't know. Do they not work out?
They work out a lot. I mean,
well, how is this possible?
I don't know.
How can you gain so much weight?
Massive amount of calories. I mean, look at this NFL linesman, for example, right? I mean, like the offensive defensive line, some of these guys look kind of really big and they got their bellies and stuff like that. So yeah, it's, you know, it's country strong. It's country strong.
Makes me wanna eat less chicken, but that's.
I can't imagine that their life expectancies are that great. I'd be curious about that.
I'd be curious about that too.
But I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Japan's
You should go to
awesome.
sumo. You should go to sumo.
Yeah, but I haven't done the sumo. But okay,
No.
yeah, maybe I will.
Yeah.
I think that'd be very interesting.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I've been to Japan about 3 different times. Yeah, but I never did the sumo thing. And the next one I want to go to, I want to go skiing there because why not?
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Oh, although, you know, one thing, so I'm taking the girls to Mexico City, and we're going to see Lucha Libre. You know what that is?
Oh, the mask.
Yeah, the wrestling.
Right?
The wrestling. Yeah.
You're a secret closeted wrestling fan. Look at you traveling the world to go
Well,
over
I
these
just like
wrestling
that kind of.
cultures.
I think that kind of stuff is fascinating. So
That's
anyway,
hilarious.
well, speaking of Japan, what do we have up next on this?
Well, interestingly enough, Japan has developed a universal artificial blood using hemoglobin vesicles, tiny lipid-coated particles filled with purified hemoglobin from expired donor blood. These vesicles mimic red blood cells' oxygen carrying ability, but are virus free and compatible with all blood types, eliminating the need for matching. Each vesicle is about 200 to 285 nanometers in size, with a bloodstream half life of around 8 hours, enough for emergency use. Early human trials have shown good safety up to 400 milliliter doses with only mild side effects. Unlike donor blood, which expires in about 42 days, this artificial blood lasts up to 2 years at room temperature or 5 years refrigerated. With Japan's aging population and growing global blood shortages, this breakthrough could transform emergency medicine, making fast, safe transfusions possible in ambulances, war zones, and remote clinics. Clinical rollout is expected by 2030 if trials continue to show positive results. That's crazy. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's mostly for, I think, short-term use. Just like looking at
Yeah.
if somebody's out in battle and they gets wounded and they need blood immediately, like right now you have to match them up with the right blood type and stuff like that, which, you know, is challenging. If you can just throw in something and let it stay
Right.
there, the half hour of 8 hours means that it's only gonna half of it's gonna kind of go away in 8 hours. So
Mm.
you've got probably a day of good
Yeah.
use, and by that time you can get somebody somewhere and get them, the appropriate blood type. So
So it won't lessen like the need for blood donors or anything like that because we still eventually have
yeah,
to match them, or do you think that
right.
okay,
At least based on this technology, right? Like, I mean,
right.
this is obviously like one step towards something. So if you can have something that will last, a day right now, maybe they'll continue coming up with advances so that lasts a lot longer. So just for reference, I mean, I think the big thing here is that, right now when people give blood, it's only good for about 42 days. So if they've got,
Mm.
so you're throwing away a lot of blood, right? You're throwing
Wow,
away a
I'm
lot
so
of blood.
upset by knowing
And
this.
so what they're doing here, it sounds like, is they're saying, okay, well, we can still get the hemoglobin out of that blood and we can use that and store that for up to 5 years in these vesicles. And so I think that's the big part of this because it's only going to last about a day, whereas your normal, red blood cells live for about 120 days. Um, and so, it's still quite a ways from having like regular blood. The other thing is it's just the hemoglobin. It's just the red blood cell part. And when you have whole blood, obviously you have got a bunch of other stuff too, like the platelets and things like that help you from bleeding, all the white blood cells and so on. So it's interesting. It's a very cool thing, but I think it's just like, um, an evolving technology, and this is certainly good for war.
Well, oh God, don't mention war right now.
I know, seriously.
But yeah, it is good for it's good to help. It's going to definitely help. But okay. I mean, but that's great. I love that they're even working on this. Next they need to really figure out how to get I feel like something like a liquid that matches your blood that maybe turns into whatever you have, like, O type, A type, B type, whatever.
Yeah,
I feel
I think
like
they're going to do all sorts of cool stuff in the next
I
few
know.
years. I think it's just a matter of time. One lesson to remember from this though is the usual lifetime of a red blood cell, being 120 days, and the reason
Yeah,
that
that's
that's
crazy.
one thing that's important is so you remember what hemoglobin A1C is?
No,
Yeah, so
what?
hemoglobin A1C is like,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, give it a
no,
shot.
go ahead.
Come on,
I
no,
don't
no, come
know.
on, come on. Okay. All right.
Hemoglobin
Hemoglobin
A1C.
A1C is the glycated hemoglobin. So what that is the hemoglobin that when you have it's essentially measuring how much blood sugar is in your
Oh,
blood
the glucose. Okay.
on average over 120 days, right? So that's why it's 120 days because those red blood cells last for about 120 days. So it's giving you an average of how much, blood sugar gets attached to these red blood cells over 120 days. So that's why hemoglobin A1C, that essentially is hemoglobin with sugar attached to it, is a better long-term measure of how your blood glucose, how well controlled your blood glucose is than just testing blood glucose.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, we're on our way, people.
There you go.
There you go. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk to licensed psychologist, professor, and forgiveness researcher, Dr. Robert Enright. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie. It's time for our guest interview. It's the breakdown with Dr. Robert Enright. Dr. Enright is a licensed psychologist, professor of educational psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and widely recognized as the pioneer of forgiveness science. He's the co-founder of the International Forgiveness Institute and has spent over 4 decades researching the psychological and physical benefits of forgiveness, a leading authority in moral development and emotional healing. Dr. Enright has developed evidence-based forgiveness interventions used around the world, and his work bridges rigorous academic research with practical frameworks that help people let go of resentment and reclaim their inner peace. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Enright. Welcome to the show.
It's my honor to be with you. Thanks for asking me.
I feel like forgiveness is definitely something we all struggle with. So I'm wondering, how did you become this pioneer of forgiveness science? What inspired you to explore this topic that everyone is dealing with?
Well, when I was hired by the University of Wisconsin in the late 1970s to do work in the Department of Educational Psychology, they hired me to do moral development, because that's what I studied when I got my degree, my doctoral degree at the University of Minnesota. And I fell in line with everybody else, and I was an obedient academic, studying how children and adolescents and adults think about justice and how they become more complex and subtle in trying to decide moral dilemmas. And as I fell in line, I got tenure doing that. I had grants doing it. I was a fair-haired academic because I was obedient. And then one day I awakened to ask myself a very dangerous question. Who am I helping with my research? And the answer was, well, maybe a few of my colleagues, where we go to professional meetings, pat each other on the back for our latest publications. Then we go back to our labs, helping no one. So in 1985, when I do the math quickly, I'm in my 40th year of studying forgiveness now. I asked the question, well, in the area of morals, what can actually help people? And I thought of the opposite of justice or injustice. How do we, shall I say, climb out of the pit when people push us down and are unfair to us and cruel to us? And the idea of justice came up. Forgiveness came up, not justice. So as a forgiveness, I'm sure there's got to be quite a bit published on this, because we're in the helping professions after all. So I had to do something very primitive back then. I had to walk all the way to the library to do a computer search of the literature. And there was no Google. So I asked the librarian to do a computer search of every scientific study that had ever been published in any of the social sciences for the past 100 years. And she came back with a blank sheet of paper and said, there aren't any. And I had a friend do the same search at the University of Kansas, and he came back with a blank sheet of paper. So I thought, forgiveness has never been applied with scientific rigor and statistics and all of that ever. And I realized that in terms of publications, that was in fact the case. It had never happened. So I asked graduate students, and I had graduate students from all over the world interested in the topic, from Israel, Taiwan, Korea, Greece, the United States, and we all sat around every Friday for a Not for Credit seminar on exploring forgiveness. And little did I know how controversial it would be, because people told me I had ruined my career. My
Interesting.
grants dried up. I couldn't buy a grant. And in fact, in one interview I had, it was a world famous experimental psychologist who was in a granting agency, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do with forgiveness?" I said, "Well, I want to help those in prison to forgive those who abused them before, to quiet the rage so they don't dump their rage on others." And he said, "This is great. I'm going to rank you number one." I thought, well, this is going to be easier than I thought. And then a month later, I got the rejection letter. So I called him and said, "You ranked me number one and I got rejected. What's up?" And he said with deep anger, "Professor Enright, you embarrassed me." And I said, "Well, how did I embarrass you?" He said, "Well, I went into this high-powered meeting, I praised your work, and everyone thought it was ridiculous. And they said, give Enright money to help prisoners forgive after what they've done to others. Why, they should be seeking forgiveness from us." Rejected.
Wow.
And it never got easier from there. Okay?
Yeah,
I had to fight for it.
Well, and since then we've realized, or you've uncovered a lot in terms of the importance of chronic resentments or unforgiveness, as something that affects not only your psychological state and being in jail, but also your physical health and longevity. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the physical manifestations of resentment and unforgiveness?
Sure. Unforgiveness and resentment have a way of systemically hurting the body. For example, the blood pressure can actually raise. The restlessness and lack of sleep can occur. Not wanting to work out so rigorously anymore because you're fatigued, okay? And eventually, when people live with this, what I call the poison of resentment, it can eventually drift into anxiety and depression, which also have effects on the body, where you're not going to get as much sleep and you're going to be maybe hurt in your relationships, which of course are connected with longevity. And so this poison can spread without a person even realizing it. And they literally can live with this poison in their body for decades and perhaps bring it to their grave.
Yeah, interesting. So there are physical manifestations in terms of cortisol and all those types of things that have been measured as well. Is that right?
That's right. Cortisol levels can in fact be affected here, and people, therefore, their emotions can keep on the train track going downhill. And when that indeed happens, most times people almost take this kind of anger and this way of life as an identity. And they say, well, this is who I am. And they almost feel like it gives them a certain power, which in fact they're becoming to such a degree that others are having power over them because it's affecting their body, it's affecting their brain, and it is affecting their emotional and psychological health.
I definitely have dealt with somebody who has that I am statement, and you were so right with the power. You just feel like you can't get through to them either.
Right.
But there's this idea that forgiveness isn't just one thing. There's decisional and emotional forgiveness. Can you walk us through what that actually means and why both are so important in anyone's healing journey?
Yeah. We have a recent publication in the Journal of Theoretical and Philosophical Psychology where we say that the idea of breaking forgiveness up into decisions or emotions is not the whole picture, because forgiveness includes decisions, it includes emotions, it includes behavior. Okay? And so when a person is forgiving, it's in the context of injustice. And therefore, when the person is treated unjustly, the person tends to have kind of negative views and responses toward the one who acted unjustly. And forgiveness is putting the pieces together all over again, kind of like Humpty Dumpty getting put back together again, where your thinking toward the other person becomes more positive. Deliberately, you do the work on it. Your feelings toward the person become more compassionate or soft, and your behaviors toward that person become more gentle and more helpful. Even if the person is no longer with you or is deceased, you can actually have behaviors toward that person indirectly by donating to a charity in that person's name or saying something kind about the other, that to other people. And when you do all of that together, thinking, feeling, and behaving all put together, you have a moral virtue, which is goodness toward those who have not been good to you, without uh, excusing what the other did. What the other did was wrong, is wrong, and will always be wrong. When you forgive, you may or may not reconcile. Okay? Just because you're being good to them and from your mind and your heart and your behavior doesn't mean you'll come together again if the person continues to be cruel to you. And a big misunderstanding about forgiveness is when you forgive, you should let justice grow up with forgiveness. So if a person, for example, is constantly criticizing you and putting you down, forgive and ask something of the person. So you don't excuse, you may or may not reconcile, and you don't throw justice under the bus when you forgive.
Forgive them to their face, or just forgive them in your own sanctuary?
You do not have to forgive the person to that person's face if you think it'll create a new argument. Because a lot of times the other isn't ready to hear it, and the person is likely to say, huh? You're being overly sensitive. What did I do? There's another forgivable offense right there. So you do not have to go. There's no rule book. See, what I like about forgiveness, there's no rule book saying you must behave in this certain way to achieve it. You can show the person you're forgiving by attending to them civilly, by helping the person if the person needs help, but you don't have to go right out and hold up a sign, I have forgiven you. This is my forgiveness sign. They'll understand by the way you are treating them now as a human being.
I think is interesting to think of forgiveness, from the standpoint of someone giving forgiveness or resentment as doing someone else a favor.
Right.
But the reality is, just in preparation for this, the physiological effects, just coming back to that, are pretty significant. I mean, we talk about cortisol levels, but inflammatory markers as well. It looks like there's studies on inflammatory markers going down, and less hypertension. You've got decreases in heart rate variability. So obviously, sort of this reverse in sympathetic tone to parasympathetic tone, basically just letting go of a lot of hostility and rumination has this huge implications for your own physical health.
Yes, it does. And what's interesting, though, is to get there, the paradox is you have to reach out to the other in goodness to get that. Because if you just simply say, I'm going to lie on my couch and I'm going to eat my potato chips and try to let it go, it's not that easy. When you've been treated very, very badly, saying, I'm just going to let it go and move on, doesn't work very well, actually. And for example, we've done studies in hospice situations. Mary Hansen and I did a study with women in their 80s who were dying of cancer, actually. And some of them were holding on to this resentment for over 40 years. Okay? And when they forgave, their sense of hope for the future actually was going up while their physical indicators were going down. And it was because they knew they were leaving their family in a better situation. Some drew the family to the bedside, for example, and were able to reconcile. And so they were able to stop that kind of effect on the body and the emotions after carrying it for 40 years. I wish we had introduced it to them 40 years ago so they didn't have to live half of their life that way.
Right. Well, and that's more embedded in them. So how would you even
Yes.
get somebody who's like 80, not doing well health-wise, they have a ton of resentment. Like, how do you get them to chip away at something that has been so much in their foundation of who they are after 40 years?
By pointing out the pain that is living within them, they might not even be aware of all of the levels of pain that Buck just pointed out to us. And
Mm-hmm.
when they give it a thought, well, it has affected my mood, has affected my sleep, has affected my relationships, it affects my own inner being. That pain, it becomes a high motivation to change that. And when we say, well, we have some science here that learning to forgive may actually give you some peace in your later stage of life, the courageous women said yes to that. The pain is a motivator.
Totally. And my favorite book, and I know I've mentioned this on the show before, is The Body Keeps the Score. And
Mm.
have you read that book?
I have not read it, but I should.
Please. I mean, honestly, because from what you're saying, I truly do believe that, holding on to these resentments or these traumas or things that you go through fester in the body and become physical manifestation.
Right.
And
Yep.
and that's what it's basically about. And to me, it's like one of my favorite books. So I do bring it up because I hear
That
it.
sounds great.
It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
beautiful.
And so, but when we point this kind of thing out, almost a
Hmm.
checklist with people,
Hmm.
and they realize they have a lot more pain than they were even aware of having, they're then motivated to say, well, what can I do about it? And when we show them scientific evidence, most people will say yes and not reject it.
Well, that it's just a selfish thing then. I mean, people want to feel better, and it's almost like, I don't want to give this person that I have resentment towards,
It's
this
prideful.
advantage over me. Yeah, well, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're just like, it's not worth it. They're not worth it, so let's just move on with it, and I'll feel better
Mm.
as well. I'm curious, are there certain populations that you see sort of more profound effects in? I actually saw a study suggesting, and it wasn't, randomized clinical trial or anything, but there might actually be some potential benefit or survivor advantages to even cancer patients who are in the midst of this.
Yeah. Actually, there's a doctoral dissertation done recently in the United Kingdom by Dr. Pavel Katochek, and he's from uh, Europe, and he is a very active oncologist, and he actually did a study with multiple myeloma patients, okay, blood cancer, and again, they willingly agreed to forgive those who've hurt them, and they were carefully screened where they, in fact, had injustices against them. And they were compared to those who had treatment as usual. And statistically speaking, their symptoms of the multiple myeloma actually evened out over the months that he studied them. And so it's not that they were cured, but they had a better quality of life because the constant symptoms and the amassing of the symptoms actually settled down for them.
You've you've created some really structured forgiveness programs. How exactly do they work? And do you think that they could be brought into schools or healthcare spaces on a larger scale?
Don't I wish that happened yesterday?
Me
Yes.
too. Me too.
See, part of it is people get so busy with the norm, which I did in my early days as a professor, that you never think of thinking outside the box. And we have actually been in schools in 30 different countries of the world with forgiveness education. We have forgiveness education curriculum guides professionally produced from pre-kindergarten to the end of 12th grade. And there was a recent, what they call meta-analysis done in 10 different countries where students had forgiveness programs. Not that they're told to forgive, but they learn through watching others, through stories and the like. And across 10 cultures, there was a statistically significant difference between the two groups, those who had forgiveness education and those who did not, regarding learning to forgive those who've hurt them and a decrease in anger. Okay? And so it definitely works. We did, in terms of hospitals, here's an example. There's a number of researchers and myself who did a study with cardiac patients, and we screened them for deep abuses against them, and we had them go through a forgiveness program. And I can explain to you after I tell you about this research how we go about this. And we had them go through the program of forgiveness. And at the end of a couple of months of this, I can't remember exactly how many weeks it was, so we had them tell their stories of deep hurt against them, and we monitored their heart activity, and there was no difference between them. But then we waited a couple of months afterwards. It took a while for the physiology to catch up with the psychology because they did forgive. And after a number of months, when we hooked them up to the heart monitors, those who had forgiveness and forgave those who hurt them actually had more blood flow through their heart. And Dr. Douglas Russell, who was the physician overseeing this, said, we helped, and these were all men, we helped these men on the cardiac unit avoid chest pains and sudden death through learning to forgive. Now, we had a hard time publishing that because of the disconnect between physiological care and the psychological care of forgiveness, but it was forgiveness that at the end of the day made the difference for their hearts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could tell, damn, it's so unfortunate that these concepts they're very complex, yet they're so simple. And there are people that need to be forgiven all over the world. There are people that need to forgive all over the world. And there are things that are, really happening that affect us as we're seeing physically. Do you think that there are things that are just truly unforgivable? Because some people are just really mean.
Well, or, like the Holocaust or something like that.
Sure.
Well, let's think about the Holocaust for a minute. And a friend of mine who passed away recently, Eva Moses Kor, K-O-R, she was in the twin studies with, I'll put it in quotes, Dr. Mengele. He was no doctor. And she was, during World War II, Jewish Holocaust victim. And her twin sister Miriam died because of the experiments on their kidneys. And Eva actually donated a kidney to her sister, but it didn't save her life. And there is now a documentary film called Forgiving Dr. Mengele by Eva Moses Kor, where she forgave him and the other Nazis for what she went through. And just as you had said earlier, Nikki, her mode of survival was, I am going to forgive so that Mengele does not dominate me. I am going to stay alive. And when she did that, there's even one video in that film. She's in her 80s, and they're running on a treadmill. She's robust, and she forgave. But many of those who survived with her, other twins, didn't like the idea. Okay, one is in the film saying, but that's improper. So here's my thought on it. If someone wants to forgive the atrocious, let that person do that. If a person does not want to forgive the atrocious, let that person do that. Let us have respect for the persons as persons and not say, you have to do it the way I want it done. No, we all have our different timelines. We all have our different standards. Let's be gentle when people have been crushed by the injustices of others. And if they want to forgive, great, we've got a means for them to do it. If not, I hope they find another way.
That strikes up as Mel Robbins' "Let Them" theory with her book that just came out.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Let's not insist that others live in my image of how things ought to work. See, I even have a book called Forgiveness is a Choice, and I deliberately entitled it that way, so it's not Forgiveness is a Demand or Else. I don't think I'd want that title.
Is there a big difference between forgiving others and that resentment versus self-forgiveness? A lot of people have a lot of guilt about certain
Yep,
things. Is it
that's right.
fundamentally a different animal altogether, or is it similar?
It's not the exact same in two ways. First of all, we tend to be harder on ourselves than on others. So it sometimes takes longer, and you need more patience with yourself because we tend, sadly, to condemn ourselves more when we've broken our own standards than we are toward other people. And the other major difference is after they go through the forgiveness process, it's a good idea in self-forgiveness to go to those who've been offended by your behavior and seek forgiveness to those who've been hurt by what you have done. And it's pretty rare to hurt yourself without also hurting others. So go through the same kind of process, allow more time, be more gentle with yourself, and seek forgiveness. And then they're very, very similar, actually.
If forgiveness has such a strong connection to well-being and even longevity, as we've, discussed on the show so far, why do you think it's still not a bigger focus in the mainstream healthcare or in therapy?
Well, I think part of it is because people misunderstand what it is. I find the biggest impediment to forgiving is most people have not sat down with others and had a thoroughgoing discussion of what it really is. And so a lot of people think that when you forgive, you're being a patsy for the other. All you're doing is lying down and say, step all over me. I'm going to let you do what you have been doing to me. And they see it as useless. They see it as weakness. Others see it as only tied to religion. And if they're not a religious person, they say it's not for me. Well, the idea of moral issues have made their way into the mainstream. We now have entire departments at universities that are connected to morals. One is the law school. It's connected with justice. So why can't we bring another moral virtue into mainstream society, forgiveness, which we have done with our research, and sure, let people bring it into a religious context if they want, but also if they want to exercise it as a moral virtue such as patience or kindness or justice or whatever it is, they're able to do that because we do have a process. We have what we call 4 kind of phases that help people to successfully traverse forgiveness and get rid of the toxic resentment.
What are those 4 phases? Because I was going to ask you, how exactly do we forgive?
Yep. Well, in the early days with my graduate students, we got together and reading case studies of people who have forgiven. And then we asked people who say they have forgiven how they went through it. And we built this 4-phase model. I'll give you the short version.
Yeah.
The first phase is uncovering your pain,
Okay.
which is oftentimes resentment and anger. And they see fatigue issues and sleep issues and restlessness and discontent. And that acts as the motivator. Do you want to forgive? So the second phase is, will you decide? That's the decisional part. Will you decide to forgive or not? Do you want to open the forgiveness gym door and hit the forgiveness weights and become forgivingly fit? You want to do that? Well, we have to go through the definition again and what it's not. You won't be excusing, you may or may not reconcile, and you won't throw justice out, and you'll try to be good to the person who hurt you. Do you want to try it? Most people say yes because they've tried everything else under the sun and it hasn't worked. Then we hit what we call the work phase. That's hitting the forgiveness gym. And we start with thinking, and we widen our view of who the other person is. The person is, because it's true, more than those behaviors against you. The person might have done some good things to you in the past. And so we try to see the other person's confusion, the other person's displacement of anger, the person's frustrations, the other person's woundedness, That's thinking on the personal level. Then we hit what we call a global level of thinking. You both have worth because you're both unique. You both,
Compassion.
yeah, that's right. So if you both share a common humanity, this person is more than that. And then if the person does have a transcendent perspective, religious or not, we might ask, for example, let's say you're working with a Jewish person, which would be Eva Moses Core, for example. A question would be, well, is it true from Genesis 1 that everyone is made in the image and likeness of God? And a Jewish believer would say, of course. Well, drum roll, please. Does that mean the one who hurt you is made in the image and likeness of God? Ooh, people
Yeah.
say, wish I hadn't
Ask that
known
question.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's why it takes time.
Yeah.
So when you put this idea together of seeing the other's woundedness, seeing your common worth, seeing that you're both made in the image and likeness of God, that leads to compassion, a softened heart, still in the work phase, where you're able to stand in the pain and not throw the pain back to the other person. In other words, Gandhi's great quote, if we keep taking an eye for an eye, the whole world will be blind. And so you stop taking the eye of the other. And then when you get strong enough in the work phase, you then try to give this gift to the other to exercise the moral virtue, like a kind thought, a kind word, maybe a donation to charity. And then we hit the discovery phase where we discover, my suffering was not for nothing. We find new meaning in our suffering. We're growing in our humanity. People develop new purpose in life where they want to alleviate other suffering. And in the end of the discovery phase, we really see the ultimate paradox come into play. Those who have reached out to others are the ones who are healed. So we go through the uncovering, the decision, the work phase, and the discovery phase. And we've done it with a lot of different kind of people, like prisoners, those who were dying, and we worked with incest survivors, fibromyalgia patients, and it seems to work out quite well, actually, many, many times.
I love to hear that. Well, can you tell our listeners, if you have a book out or any resources where people can find you? Because if people really want to dive into this after hearing that explanation of the phases and stuff, I'm sure that they would really love to look you up.
Sure. And I would also say to those who are listening that if you're hesitant, that's not a bad thing. Take your time. This is your free will decision. But if you want to take a peek under the forgiveness tent, you can go to our website called internationalforgiveness.com. And I have 3 self-help books for the general public. Forgiveness is a choice. I mentioned that. Then one that's a little more deep. It's a dialogue between 2 women. It's like a Socratic dialogue called The Forgiving Life. And then both of those are published by the American Psychological Association. And the third one by Norton in New York is called 8 Keys to Forgiveness. It's in a series of 8 keys. When they asked me to do it, I called them up and said, I've got about 20 keys. Would that be okay? And they said, no, this is an 8 key series, buddy. It's 8 or nothing. So I wrote a book called 8 Keys to Forgiveness.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And do you have any social or anything for anyone to find you, or?
Well, it would really be the website. I think that would be the key, yeah. And then we also have the International Forgiveness Institute on Facebook as well.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I feel everyone is going through this or needs to forgive something, whether even if it's themselves. So I feel like this is very helpful for people. I really appreciate the work you're doing for our world and our humanity.
Thank you, Dr. Enright.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Of course. Me too. Thank you. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our healthy takeout. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie. It's time for our healthy takeout. I love this show and I don't care who knows it.
No, it's good. It's just, it's totally up your alley. This is the, sort of the
psychology,
emotional, psychological elements of health and wellness. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can totally see, I think it's sort of like empirical. If you just think about it, like when I'm really pissed off at somebody, and I probably do have like people I've never forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
Are there people you've never forgiven?
You know what? yes, I'm sure, but there's a lot that I have forgiven. Like I didn't go through this program or anything, but that's why I was like, oh, the compassion and things like that, because I've gone through my own steps to have to forgive certain people because like it literally festers in you. Like I'm not kidding about this book. Like I know I bring them up all the time, but this book is amazing. The Body Keeps the Score, because I really do believe like, and there are people in my family who are suffering from intense diseases because I truly believe they're holding on to something. And I found out later on.
Probably some truth to that. I actually don't. I think that's true. I mean, I think some people who harbor a lot of negativity in general. I mean, I think it's clearly going to affect your health, right? It's just so I get it. I guess yeah, it's a tough one to forgive everybody. I had a one thing, one that comes to mind, and of course, this isn't like they did anything that brutal to me, but these residents that I had that were like in the class right above me, I just hated these. They were just so annoying and like tried to oppress me as a junior resident. And so I just hated them so much, and I still hate them to this day. But it's not like I sit there and think about this. I mean, it's not like, I mean, it just pops into my head. So I don't think that counts because I'm kind of over
bullshit
it.
That doesn't count. You're not over it. Do you understand when you were saying I hated these people? The way that you say that, there's something definitely still in there. But
there is, but I don't. But I think like, does it matter if I don't think about them every day? If I only think about them once
but it's in your
a year?
subconscious. Well, then it's if you think about them at all.
Once
it's in your
year?
subconscious.
All right,
It's still
fine.
there. Like it's still there. Otherwise,
Okay.
you would not remember, like you would not think about them at all. But the fact that they resurface at least like once a year, like
Yeah,
they're
in the context
definitely
of people
still
I don't forgive,
there.
and I hold hatred towards.
Well, you know, another way, honestly, another way that I've been familiar with forgiveness is through ayahuasca, actually, because there's a lot of people, a lot of people are going there to heal and to be and to reveal things that they aren't consciously aware of, and so a lot of it has to do with people's parents, honestly. And so because they're like, their mom or dad did this or that or abandoned them or anything like that. And ayahuasca allows you to really get deep down into the emotion and deep down into having compassion for these people as your parents or even friends or whoever it is. But mostly parents get brought up a lot.
Yeah, it's
And
similar to like, so there's some parallels there with like PTSD, right? Because
sure.
If you remember our interview with Dr. Michael Mance on
Mm-hmm.
ketamine,
Love him. Yeah.
and when he was talking about the way that ketamine seems to work with PTSD is so it's a dissociative thing, right? So it's disassociating the memories from the emotions, so that you can start looking at the memories and not associating an emotion with it.
Yeah,
I
mean,
feel like you're never going to, like they were
helps.
talking about Dr. Mengele and Hitler and all that stuff. You're never going to forget about that. But then, dissociating with the emotions is the forgiveness, I think.
Yeah, well, according to Enright, it was more of like lessening, like it's not a big fire, a raging fire. It's like you're putting it down to maybe a pilot light, like it's still going to be there. You're still going to be like, it still happened to you. You still need to have that validated, but you have a different view on the person. Like going back to, like I said about parents and things, it's like what you start to realize is we're all here doing this human experience for the first time. So everybody, like, it's like people are doing the best they can at that moment. And that, if they are, not educated in things or they have no compassion for their kids or whatever, they're going to make choices that, that's just the best tools that they had at that point. So it's about being able to really level with that and
or they
find
were
that
just
compassion.
assholes. Okay, they were just assholes.
Yeah, but maybe they're assholes because of something, like something had to happen. Like we're born into this world, in my opinion, all as light, like all as we are conditioned and raised certain ways, or things happen to us, we're abandoned, or things that we hold trauma. And that's what creates personality. It's their personal reality. So it's to be able to find these steps. And I really love that he gave us these, like, at least the steps, you can go and research deeper on your own, but to actually have a little bit more of clarity of like, okay, there's these steps and these are the things that we do within them. I think it'll allow people to take away from this episode of their own journey of forgiveness, whether they want to deep dive or not. But I think that it was a nice start.
Yeah. Well, sounds good. We'll take that one for the week and think about it. You want to read us out?
Yes, of course. Longevity Junkie is created by Dr. Buck Joffrey, MD. It is executive produced by myself, Nikki Lee, Dr. Buck Joffrey, and Phil Ferragamo, and we're distributed by our friends at 8cast. See you next time.